Welcome to the RotoWire Prospect Podcast. I'm your host, James Anderson. We're brought to you by PickSix, the new fantasy game from Draftkings. Use code RWPicks for $50 in PickSix credits with a $5 deposit. My guest this week is great Alex Jensen. We're going to talk about the draft a little bit, but we're going to kind of take a couple different angles here, talk about what some teams do well in terms of development and some interesting picks, some trends in the draft that we've noticed. And then we'll get to some of Alex's favorite players from the draft. The reason I wanted to have Alex on, actually, I saw just a really interesting tweet that he sent out after the draft, or after at least the first day of the draft. And it's something that I'd noticed as well. And it was kind of a trend of three of the smartest teams in baseball. I think, undeniably the Orioles, the Dodgers, and the Brewers have kind of targeted, or at least gone after, a type of position player that, maybe there's a case for going after these guys, but it's interesting that all three of these teams have done the same kind of thing here. And in the past two drafts, they've taken some kind of slap hitting center fielders, some guys from this most recent draft who might not necessarily be slap hitters, but are definitely up the middle, athletic, plus runners, potentially plus defender types. And then there was the interesting Vance Honeycutt pick by the Orioles as well this year that doesn't quite fit into that bin, but it's an interesting pick nonetheless. So, we can talk about these specific players in general. The true slap hitters, I would say, were from the 2023 draft, with the Orioles taking Enrique Bradfield, and then the Dodgers taking Kendall George, a couple center fielders with just big-time speed, and in theory with George, big-time defense. Obviously, Bradfield, the defense is unquestioned. And then kind of guys that it's sort of TBD on what type of power we'll see. But from this most recent class, the Dodgers took Kellen Lindsey, who's, a major athlete, 70 runner at least, TBD on the type of power they're going to get. And then the Brewers went underslot with Braylon Payne in the first round, who's kind of a similar type of player, TBD on the power, but, big time speed from Braylon Payne. And then obviously the Honeycutt pick by the Orioles this year. So, Alex, what are your theories about what these very smart teams are thinking behind these picks? And what did you think about the picks in general?
So, man, there is so many different reasons that they could be doing this. So it is really tough to tell. And it's something that I actually really want to dig into. But the first things I'm kind of thinking of is, I think something most people have noticed that are actually watching games in minor league ball right now is that defense is just way down compared to what it used to be. I mean, you're seeing a lot of people that should realistically be first baseman, DH, playing premium positions on a lot of squads. And I think that was kind of reaction to the whole analytic push in baseball, where you got a lot of really great analytical hitters coming, getting drafted, both out of high school and primarily out of college. But it's kind of come at the expense of the traditional defense that you'd see. So I do think that creates some surplus value for actual quality defense, especially with the shift rules changing. So that could be one factor there. Another thing that I'm thinking about is the new rules for running. Obviously, speed's going to play up a little bit more. But the biggest thing that I was thinking of is I've noticed kind of an epidemic of hitters coming up with swings that are going to struggle at the top of the zone. And that's just not true of the more traditional slap hitter approach. I think that you're going to be seeing a lot of pitchers probably switch to that. And I mean, my Mariners are definitely guilty of it. A lot of our best prospects do have swings that maybe some trouble up in the zone once they're facing MLB level pitching. And I think they're some of the best prospects in the game. So I think that you're going to see a lot of pitchers kind of react to that and be pitching a lot more up in the zone, trying to exploit the weaknesses in those swings. And maybe that slap hitter approach might actually play up a little bit, because they're going to be slapping line drives everywhere and using that speed and being dynamic on the base pass. But could just be as simple as these teams really believe in their development as well, which would make a lot of sense given that they're three of the best teams at developing players in baseball. So I'm really interested to see how things kind of play out.
Yeah, one of my theories with the guys like, Bradfield, George to some degree, and certainly with Honeycutt is I think probably the easiest things to scout are defense and speed. Like you're not gonna draft a guy that your scouts tell you is a 70 grade defender and a 70 grade runner, and then find out 6 months later that he's not those things. Whereas you could take a guy that, like a college hitter who's a bat first player, where you think that he's going to be a plus hitter with plus power. And a lot of times we do see those guys aren't that caliber of hitter once they get into pro ball. So it's maybe kind of, you sort of know what you're getting with the defense and the speed. And then, like you said, you're betting on your development to kind of coax out as much offense as possible from those types of players. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got a question. Okay.
Yeah, go. No, please.
I was kind of curious, like, if you were ranking these guys for a fantasy perspective or maybe real life, like, what order do you like these guys in?
Ooh,
I have thoughts on that.
So these 5 guys, right? Yeah. So,
and Honeycutt's obviously a very different profile, but
right. Yeah. Maybe I'll stick to we'll get to Honeycutt in a second. So
sure.
George would be last for me. Kendall George of the Dodgers. I think he is the least likely to clear that offensive bar where he's in a lineup every day, especially for a first division team. And then I think the reports on his defense, like Bradfield is a Gold Glove caliber center fielder. I don't think there's any debate about that. Whereas George, I've heard from some people that he doesn't take the type of routes that could allow him to be like a plus defensive center fielder. So that puts a little bit more pressure on his bat. And I think I would. The tough thing about Bradfield is he's very, very good at some things, but I haven't really seen much progress in the power department with him. He's an older 22-year-old at high A, and he's still got an ISO under 100. So he has hit 3 home runs this year, but I think we're probably still talking about a guy that is never going to hit double-digit homers. I would at least be surprised if he hit double-digit homers in a season. And then the question with Bradfield becomes, is the defense so good that he is commanding everyday playing time as like the number 9 hitter maybe for the Orioles? I think that's a possibility, but they also just have so many good prospects that it could be tough to break through there. So definitely Bradfield ahead of George. And then with the 2 guys from the most recent draft, Kellen Lindsay of the Dodgers, I think Lindsay is my favorite of the 4 because he's kind of I think there's more sort of a TBD with Lindsay and Payne. With George and Bradfield, we see what they've done in pro ball. We knew the pre-draft scouting reports, and nothing's really changed in terms of the power with those guys. With Lindsay, I could see him being a 15 homer guy in time, especially with the Dodgers developing him. And then obviously the speed is there. Payne, an underslot first rounder in a bad class. I didn't even do any prep work on Payne before the draft. But I would, I think like Payne versus Bradfield is close for me in terms of who's 2, who's 3. And then I would have George 4th. How about you?
So I completely agree. Kendall George, even at the time, it was just a pick that's not for me. And this usually isn't my profile that I like, which is why it kind of stood out so much to me. I see it somewhat similarly, but a little bit differently. I think, and this has kind of changed since the draft for me, just because I was going off what I'd heard about Kellen Lindsay. He kind of got the pop-up, a lot of Trey Turner comps, and I hadn't seen too much of him just because I wasn't watching Florida Prep too much this year. The swing, I don't necessarily love with him. And I think that it's going to be one that's going to take a while to change. And he did get good money from the Dodgers, but he got, I think, like $800,000 less than Braylon Payne did still, even Payne under slot. I think he got 3.4, if I remember correctly. I I just didn't see as much there in the frame. He's definitely a great athlete. You got to trust Dodgers player dev, but a lot of time with them, with guys like this, it does take a while for them to figure out what I think needs to be a complete swing overhaul. So that scares me a little bit with him, especially in a down prep year like this. And Kel Lindsey, I mean, normally Florida prep is like, okay, they're battle tested. This year, not as much. So I think I have him 3, and then it kind of comes down to Payne and Bradfield for 1 for me.
Okay.
Braylon Payne, he's interesting because he's another one where like the swing is super slappy. It's a super slappy swing. But also like he's got a good frame. Like I think he's got like a frame that he could grow into like above average power, actually, like raw power. It's just the swing makes me think that he could have like at maturity, like 55 raw with like 30 in-game power, which is weird. I've heard good things about the bat to ball. The swing looks very contact geared. He's really young for the class, really fast, really good defense. I want to like him, and I like the Brewers dev. I think I'd have him number 2. I like Enrique Bradfield. For me, like I think he actually hits the ball pretty hard for this profile, and he's starting to elevate the ball a bit more. And I think just his glove he might be the best defensive center fielder I've ever seen at the time of a draft. So for me, it's kind of like, even if he's like an 85 OPS plus sort of player, WRC plus player, like I think he could still be like a 2.5 to 3 WAR player. So he's going to get those at bats and going to get you steals. And then I think that he has enough power to be like a league average hitter at least, in a loaded lineup. So I think he's number 1 for me.
Yeah, that you're kind of talking me into Bradfield a bit more. And the more I kind of think about it, like, there've been plenty of really good teams that have put a, below league average hitter towards the bottom of their lineup who gives them 70 grade or better defense. And, like a guy like Jose Siri with the Rays, for instance, like for fantasy, he was still viable, even though everyone knew he was going to hit like 215 or whatever because of the speed and the power. And it's not going to be as much power maybe with Bradfield, but even if he's just a guy that's hitting 9th, maybe hitting, 265, if he's giving you 40 plus steals every year, he's a guy who's going to be drafted in every fantasy league. And, if the Orioles are at sort of peak of their powers, they probably have just studs from 1 to 7 or even 1 to 8 in the lineup, and they could afford to have a guy hitting 9th who isn't maybe putting that much fear into pitchers, but is giving them that A+ defense in center field. So, it's kind of scary with the Orioles because you just don't know exactly which guys are going to play and which guys aren't. But I definitely see the case for Bradfield first. And Payne's an interesting one because I do love how young he is, and I'm with you on the Brewers player dev. But yeah, just the whole art of adjusting a guy's swing there's a lot that goes into that, and sometimes it goes well, sometimes they lose something else that they were doing well as they're adjusting their swing. But
especially for a pop-up player too, where isn't that track record of knowing they can do it. Right.
And yeah, it's a bad, well, we'll get to the class a bit later. But what did you, I kind of shared my thought on the Honeycutt pick with you on Twitter. Basically, if you don't think this is a very good class, but you have, a bunch of 70s on your scouting report on Honeycutt, and the only thing that isn't, really high end is the hit tool. Even if it's a low percentage chance that you develop him into a guy that hits enough to play every day, if you do succeed in that development, then you actually have a guy that can crack that Orioles lineup. And they just have so much prospect depth that they, more so than maybe any other team, they could afford to take like a big swing on a guy like this and miss on it, and they might not even really notice it. So that was my theory behind the pick. What did you think about the Orioles taking Vance Honeycutt in the first round?
Yeah, and I do agree, particularly in this class and with an organization like the Orioles and where they're at right now, it makes a lot of sense. And I kind of think Connor Griffin went 9th, I think, in the draft. Like, to me, like Vance Honeycutt's kind of like, the Family Guy, like, do you want the boat or the mystery box? And well, the mystery box could be anything. It could even be a boat. Like, that's how I view Vance Honeycutt and Connor Griffin. Like, they're very similar players, except for I think Vance Honeycutt's a little bit more proven where you actually know what you're getting. Whereas Connor Griffin, like, maybe because he's younger, the hit tool will, and the approach and everything will suddenly jump a ton, but it could also be way worse. And Honeycutt's at least proven he can hit against ACC pitching. Something that I noticed this year is that he started dropping his hands at the beginning of his swing, which I did not see the year before. And as a result, he is absolutely demolishing low ball pitches. But I think it's one of the most extreme things where, like, if you attack him up in the zone, he's very vulnerable. And he has been chasing a lot more this year. I think he's up almost 11% in terms of chase rate from last year, which is kind of weird. The numbers look a little bit better overall, but if you go watch some of his highlights from this year and then go watch some for 2023, he was crushing a lot of balls up in the zone. It is almost impossible to find a highlight from 2024 where any of the pitches that he's crushing are above halfway up the thigh. So that's something that's kind of concerning for me. And I wonder is something that maybe the Orioles will address. I don't know. Because I think that if they can get him to a 40 hit tool, he's going to be a star. Maybe fantasy, there'll be some issues with OBP and average, but in real life, he'll be a star. I think you brought up Jose Siri. I think he could be a really similar player to that. The thing that concerns me is that he reminds me a ton of Judd Fabian, who I also liked, and I think in this class would probably have gone in about the same range. And that hasn't gone perfectly for the Orioles. So we've kind of seen that blueprint in the same organization. But I mean, so for me, he's probably not someone that I will own too much of because there's always going to be someone higher on him than me. But I get it. And particularly in this class, I get it. I also will kind of note with the Orioles, their next pick, I believe, was Griff O'Farrell, who's basically the shortstop version of this profile, where it's kind of the slap contact, but really good defense and speed. So yeah, it's definitely a trend that I think is really going to be interesting to see how it plays out over time.
Yeah, and just to put Honeycutt had a 27.5% strikeout rate as a junior for UNC. And I get scared off of college hitters that are 21, 22%. I've never, since I've been playing dynasty leagues, even thought about drafting a college hitter that had a strikeout rate in college above 25%. Can you think of a time when that's actually worked out where a guy's been that high up in terms of as a junior in college?
Man.
It's tough. I mean, I know, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I mean, I know when I was talking with Jim Callis, he couldn't really come up with anyone where it worked out, but
it reminds me of, man, for live looks, I remember Hunter Bishop. I was there watching him, and they had a lot of other players on that team. It was fun to watch, but I remember just seeing him being there's no way that's going to work against better pitching. And sure enough, it did. And it's not a dissimilar profile to Hunter Bishop too. Different swing and everything, but I mean, it's not my profile I like.
Eye test wise with Bishop, it probably was scary. I want to see if I can look up what he was as a junior, because I remember sort of talking myself into Hunter Bishop, and that was when I sort of had a higher opinion of sort of what the Giants were doing, maybe. So let's see, his junior year for Hunter Bishop in the Pac-12, so worse competition. But junior year for Hunter Bishop, he was at basically 22% with the strikeout rate. So, I guess if you ACC versus Pac-12, it's I guess sort of similar there. But it's almost sort of it's kind of like a heat check pick for the Orioles, where it's if we could actually turn this guy into a 40 grade hitter, that's a major accomplishment, and we're on top of the world. But if we don't, no one will really remember.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other thoughts on these guys before we head to a break?
No, I think everything was said.
Sweet. Well, yeah, if anyone's watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if anyone wants to come hang out in the RotoWire Discord, rotowire.com/chat. I've been talking about where some players might be ranking on the top 400 update, which will be live on the site in, I would say, roughly 48 hours. That'll be live on the site, so keep an eye out for that. Did you ever play the over-under game with your friends? Think I can eat that slice of pizza in under 30 seconds, or I know it'll take you over a minute to down that 2-liter. If you have, then you're going to love PickSix, the new fantasy game from Draftkings. Here's how to play during baseball season. Pick between 2 and 6 players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat, like runs, hits, strikeouts, and more. Track your picks and play against others for a shot to win huge cash prizes. That's all there is to it. Download the new DraftKings PickSix app and use code RWPicks. New customers play $5 and get 50 in PickSix credits. That's code RWPicks. For new customers to play $5 and get 50 in PickSix credits only on DraftKings PickSix. The crown is yours. 1 per new customer, non-withdrawable PickSix credits expire in 6 months. Limited time offer. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 18 plus in most eligible states. Not available in all states, including New York and Connecticut. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See terms at picksix.draftkings.com/promos. Can certain weather conditions lead to more home runs? The atmosphere can affect how far a baseball flies by 20%. Home run forecast measures the weather conditions at a ballpark to tell us if the atmosphere is good or bad for ball flight during a game. An index value that rates the areas created for each game and ballpark and is displayed on a scale from 1 to 10. Home Run Forecast premium site offers index values by the hour for each game, 24-hour forecasts, wind direction, speed, and even whether the roof will be open at certain stadiums. Home Run Forecast is offering a special for the start of the baseball season. You can get access to the premium site for the entire season for only $28, a savings of nearly 30%. Go to homerunforecast.com/RotoWire now to sign up. Okay, so kind of hinted at a little bit there in the first segment, Alex, but just overall thoughts on this class. I did a mock first-year player draft last week, and I think of the 4 people drafting in that mock FYPD, I think I might have been the lowest on the class overall. So where are you at on it?
Yeah, I mean, let's see. I've been doing drafts since 2017. This is probably the worst that I've seen. Not probably. It's the worst draft class I've seen on paper. I mean, that can change. Like, you never know how things are going to play out over time. But to me, I was not impressed. I thought that the college hitting, I think I'm a lot lower on than most people. I think that college pitching was just way down, and that's why the hitters looked a lot better. So I'm a lot lower on a lot of the college hitters than it seems most people are. As I was saying, the reason I'm so much lower is I think the stats were super inflated by how bad the pitching was. So I don't love that particularly. I don't think that the prep hitting was great by any means at all. I don't think anyone thinks that. To me, the strength of this class was prep pitching, and it was a really good prep pitching class. Like, I thought there was a lot of depth to it, and I thought that there are a couple guys at the top, maybe no like guys that are going to be immediate top 100 prospects. One that I think maybe should, but there's a lot of guys that I found really interesting with really cool stuff who could explode. So for me, like, I think the strength of this class is kind of just get some late picks and maybe try to just take some flyers on prep pitching. But if prep pitching is what you're targeting in FYPD, like, there's issues. So yeah, I'm very low on this class. I'm kind of excited for next year at this point.
Yeah, and you might be kind of among the highest on the prep pitching in the class. So I'm with you. Like, I think the college pitching is quite bad in this class. I think the prep hitting is quite bad. I mean, you're always going to be able to talk yourself into plenty of prep hitters, but just the top end is a lot of people think Connor Griffin was the best prep hitting prospect in the class, not the best pure prep hitter, but there's people that just don't even think he's going to hit. So if that's the guy that people think is the best guy, that's kind of scary. And to me, like, the best, like, I don't think college hitters are as safe as I once did. And I probably don't think they're as safe as a lot of people do. and especially bottom of the defensive spectrum college hitters. And I think that's where a lot of the strength of this class is, guys that are going to end up at first base, guys that are going to end up at second base, guys that are going to end up in left field. That's a risky profile to me, no matter how good the numbers were in college. And I think like a perfect draft class for fantasy to me is just 3 or 4 really high end prep hitting prospects mixed in with a handful of college hitters, ideally guys that can maybe play shortstop, play catcher, play third base. It's rare to have high end college center field prospects, but I don't love it at all. Now, how would you approach if you have let's say you have a first year player draft pick that's going to be like top 4, top 5. Maybe you get a guy come over from Japan who is like a clear number 1 over Condon or Bazana. But like, let's just say you're projected to get, say, maybe it's a Sasaki, maybe it's Condon, maybe it's Bazana, maybe it's Weatherholt. If you have one of those picks, are you holding it or are you shopping it?
I would always shop it personally. Just any class, even the best class, just because if you can get someone that's a star for someone that could potentially become a star, like why not do it unless your window contention's way off. But that being said, like I would be happy to take Bazana or Condon personally. Like I think that they are good. I think that they're not locked in stars, but I think they're both players I'd like to own. I have Condon first personally. It's really close for me. I think I think a lot more people are more excited about Condon being in cores than I am. I think that there's some concerns. I think I heard Jeff Ponce talking about this, my former boss. It is weird hitting in cores with how breaking balls break there and then getting out of cores. And then it's like, it's kind of like going from like high school to facing minor league breaking balls. Like there's a big difference in how the ball actually breaks in cores with other places. I think that can create some concerns for how he's going to hit on the road and his development. And I think that we've kind of seen that play out quite a bit, as well as the injury risk of just playing at an elevation like that. So I would have rather seen him go to the Reds personally, but he's still the guy I would take number 1, just because I think the upside is really there. I think he is a good hitter, and I think that there's great, like tremendous power there. I don't think he's done growing too. I think he's going to get bigger and even stronger. And I think he has a good feel for launching the ball. But Bazana, I get it too. I think he's, the floor play. I think that he's going to be someone that's going to probably contribute in 5 categories. I don't know that I think that he's going to be a star like some people do, but I think he's going to be a useful player who should move really quickly.
Yeah, that all makes sense to me. Now, what about if you're kind of in that, like, are you just kind of really aggressively shopping it if you've got like a back half of the first round type of first year player draft?
Yes. Yeah, I probably would. I mean, there's guys that I like that I definitely going to stick for, but yeah, I think I'd be somewhat aggressively shopping it this year, I think. And particularly like later picks, like I'll be looking to package together first year player draft picks for a more enticing current piece.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now you're still working on kind of your overall sort of first year player draft board and stuff like that. But you did tweet out, follow Alex at Jensen_juicy on Twitter. But you tweeted out essentially kind of your first handful of tiers. And one of the guys that you were a little bit higher on than me, PJ Morlando, right fielder who the Marlins drafted in the first round. This one was sort of a pick where if a team that I really, really trusted in developing prep hitters had taken Morlando, I would be pretty intrigued because there's big time power potential there. But I think the Marlins might be the team I trust the least at developing position players right now. I just don't think they have really anything to point to that's all that impressive on that side of things. And they've had a lot of opportunities to develop guys with high-end picks and stuff like that. So where are you at on sort of Morlando versus the landing spot of the Marlins?
I think the Marlins, I totally agree. For a long time, I was so out on everything the Marlins did. Even at the time of the draft, I was just super out on it. Right now, I think it's a bit different. I mean, they've got a new director of amateur scouting who I am biased to like, because for the longest time, he was the Mariners assistant. I also worked at D1 baseball for a while. I think I trust his opinions on prep hitters. I will say that. It's Franklin Pilieri. So there's new staff with the Marlins. I think you kind of got to give them a blank slate a little bit. It's still going to be a really tough ballpark to hit in. There's no way around that. And a lot of their minor league stadiums are also tough hitting environments. So you do have to factor that in. But with that said, I think it's kind of you can't necessarily say, oh, he did great with the Mariners, the assistant, so that means it's going to work in Miami. But I don't think you can also say, like, blame them for what the old staff did. But for me, PJ Morlando, I like him. Like, I think that there's like very clearly 70 raw power upside in terms of raw power in game. I think we'll see a little bit. He definitely has a different swing in batting practice than he does in game. He kind of takes his lower half somewhat out of the equation, but he still has so much bat speed and just natural raw power that he does still hit the ball hard in games. Team USA this year, I kind of looked at it both for college and for prep baseball. And unsurprisingly, as this is not a great class, there was a lot of guys that really struggled there. PJ Morlando was the only guy pretty much in the prep class that did not struggle as a hitter for Team USA. He actually hit very well. I think for me, what I would like to see with him to make me really buy in is have him keep that approach that he has right now in situations that aren't hitters counts. But in hitters counts, I'd love to see him just go to his batting practice swing, because it is one of the most majestic swings you'll see, and tremendous amount of power. I think he makes good contacts in game. I think that he's always made good contact in game. I think that he's maybe the prep hit tool that I'm like the second or maybe even the first most confident in just making consistent contact of anybody. And then I think that there's tremendous amount of power there. I think he recognizes pitches well. I think his swing is so simple that it's going to work well in games. He can adjust. I think he can hit pitches up in the zone. I think he can play in the outfield. So there's a lot for me to like there. And also, like, he did sign for way under slot. I think they saved $1.3 million, which basically gave them Carter Johnson, who I also personally really like quite a bit. Who's drawn a lot of, you remember from our conversation last year, this time, I was a huge Colt Emerson guy. Carter Johnson's drawn a lot of comparisons to Colt Emerson. I'm not willing to put him there in that category, but there's some similarities that you can understand why the Mariners assistant director of amateur scouting would like him. And he signed for 1.196 over slot. So basically he allowed them to sign Carter Johnson as well. I thought that overall this Marlins class, I'm a lot more bullish on across the board. So I'm definitely willing to give them some benefit of the doubt now.
Yeah, that's a good point about the new regime. And it's definitely better person sort of picking the players in the draft. I guess TBD on sort of how different things are in terms of the lower levels. And
yeah, development is the real question mark here.
So, and you mentioned you were very high on Colt Emerson last year. Mm-hmm. Just as an aside, you were also very high on George Lombard.
Yes.
And he's absolutely breaking out right now at single A after, he kind of had a power drought to start the year, but he's going to be inside my top 50 on the update here in a couple.
Let's go. I love it, man. No one this whole year, I felt like I was just kind of on my own island, like being like, hey, ignore the stat line. Yankees do weird things as a lower level player dev, but just kind of look at some of the underlying metrics. And suddenly it's starting to come out where, to me, the whole minors is down right now, but there aren't too many players that I can see having like legitimate impact in all 5 categories. And he's one of those guys.
Yeah, he's definitely, he looks the part of like a future top 10 prospect to me.
Let's go. That excites me.
Okay, so this I thought would be interesting. I wasn't exactly sure how to structure it because there are certain orgs I wanted to talk about, but I wanted to leave it sort of open-ended to you first. Who are the top 3 to 5 teams at developing pitching prospects right now?
So it's kind of tricky because I was kind of breaking this down. I'm like, well, it really depends, like what profile of pitcher is getting developed. Like, for example, like one of the teams on there for me is the Pirates, who last year as well, I was pretty early to be really excited about what they're doing, just because Xander Muth was the guy that I was really excited about. Obviously, I think everyone in the world was excited about some of their other prospects like Paul Skeens, but Xander Muth for me, I was like, oh, I love that fit in this dev. So I really like them to develop guys that have like big stuff right now. But someone like a Josh Hartle coming from Wake Forest without huge stuff, like I'm kind of curious. I don't necessarily be like, oh, now I love Josh Hartle because it's in the Pirates. But the Pirates would be up there for me. The Cubs, I think, have very similar pitching dev where it's just get guys with huge stuff and they can kind of make it pretty interesting. So the Cubs are actually up there for me. I think the Tigers have taken huge strides right now under Scott Harris, who I think did very similar things when he was in San Francisco. I like a lot of what they're doing. Jaden Ham is a great example of a player they've helped. The Dodgers, obviously, that's kind of the low-hanging fruit answer. And then I think the Mariners have done as good a job of anybody at finding the right fits for their player development. I don't know that I necessarily am like any arm is going to be perfect in the Mariners system. They can develop anybody, but they're really good at identifying which types of pitchers that they can make better and then making them better and then getting them up quickly. So they're there. I'd give some quick shout outs as well to the Brewers, who I think are as good as anyone at specifically developing people with spin and kind of making that work and make that profile work. The kind of the Wake Forest of the MLB for me. And then the Braves, I think, have probably the best major league pitching depth. I'm just a little bit less bullish on their minor league pitching depth.
Yeah, that's you mentioned a lot of the teams I wanted to talk about. And I'm glad you mentioned the Pirates first. We don't really have to talk. We don't have to talk about like Paul Skeens or Jared Jones. But like, you got Luis Ortiz potentially post type breaking out right now. Bubba Chandler, I think, is a top 5 or so pitching prospect. Thomas Harrington, I think, is maybe the most underrated pitching prospect in the minors right now. He's another guy who's going to be in my top 50 on the update. Braxton Ashcraft, obviously, is doing very well. I think durability is kind of the only question with him. Hunter Barco continues to kind of fly under the radar, even though he's been fantastic this year since coming back from injury. So they're just doing it right now. The Pirates, I love what they're doing. And a guy that I was kind of in on before the draft is Levi Sterling, and he ends up with the Pirates. How do you think they'll do with him? I mean, I think he's just sort of your classic projectable, very young prep arm with just a ton of potential. And, I think he's someone that you didn't have, I don't think, in your initial top 30. So I'm curious what you think about Levi Sterling and what the Pirates could do there.
So I didn't have him in my top 30, but before the draft, I actually did mention he's one of the quote unquote, I think I put out like 12 my guys for the draft class, 11 of which got drafted, which surprised me because it was super prep heavy. But I like him a lot, actually. He wasn't necessarily someone I thought that the Pirates of teams are going to target. I actually had him down for kind of like a Guardians Mariners pitching dev fit. But yeah, really good, athletic, 6'5" frame from the right-hand side. He repeats really well. He's got 4 pitches that I think project average now, but if you kind of bet on his frame developing, could project higher. So I think that's really good. He spins the ball really well. I think the fastball metrics are really good. He's super young, which I'm gonna be honest. I think like the young for the class prep pitcher is like the most overrated thing, like maybe in entire scouting. I think that just means that they were throwing too hard for what their elbow can handle at that age. So for certain players, I'm out on that. As for the most part, in general, it actually makes me more concerned. There aren't too many players like that have worked out in recent memory. But with him, he hasn't been throwing the ball too hard yet. I think that he's like the big concern is people that throw over 90 before they turn 17. That's a historically like almost a guaranteed UCL injury just because your body's not capable of handling that. He wasn't. He was throwing in the low 80s, and now he's jumped up to where he's 88, touching like 92. Yeah. But the physical development is there for him to throw harder in the future. which I think is going to be when his body is ready to throw that hard. So I'm a little bit less worried about injury risk, especially with how well he repeats. And so he's one of those guys who kind of has a high floor, like he projects as a back end guy, but if he develops physically, all of a sudden the sky's the limit. So yeah, I like him quite a bit, and I'm interested to see how he's going to fit into a pitching dev system like what the Pirates have.
Yeah, I like the combination of, I agree with like him being at sort of 92. That's where I would want a guy of his age to be, just given how projectable the frame is. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see where things go with Levi Sterling. Obviously you mentioned the Mariners. They've got two of the better pitching prospects from this entire class. But interestingly, you prefer Ryan Sloan, the prep righty, to Jurrangelo Chinte, the both-handed pitcher out of Mississippi State. I think you like both of them, but can you kind of talk about what you see in Sloan, and then are you kind of mid-pack, do you think, on Chinte, or are you lower, higher? Where are you at on those guys?
I think is it Chinte? Is that how you say it? I've heard Saint. I've heard all sorts of things.
I'm honestly not sure.
Okay, yeah, that's a tricky last name even to type out. It's cool. I think Saint or Chinte, however you say it. I do like him. I was a little bit lower on him in a vacuum, but I love the landing spot in the Mariners. I was a little surprised that he got full slot at 15, if I'm being honest, but it's kind of, like I said, the Mariners scout very well to their player dev, and it's really easy to see why they would like him. I think it sounds like he's probably going to be letting go of pitching from the left-hand side, except for maybe in some extreme cases, which I think is a good thing for him.
Yeah.
I think that kind of almost like being a two-way player, like it's really tough to develop at an MLB level doing that. But he's kind of a dead ringer for Bryce Miller, so it's really easy to see the development path. I just don't know if the ceiling is crazy high. Like I look at him as like a very safe bet to quickly become an SP4, which in this class is kind of awesome because there are not very many guys that I think are safe bets to become valuable players. But I'm a little bit less excited about the ceiling on it. For me, I really like Ryan Sloan. He was my top prep pitcher in the class, even before Will Smith went out of it. I was a little bit lower on Will Smith personally. I think it's a really pretty curveball. I can't think of a single pitcher in recent memory that coming out of the prep ranks that's been fastball with its 70 curveball that's worked out. I think there's been some guys. Matt Allen's kind of there. I think the best comparisons, Carter Stewart. I was not surprised to see him get into campus. I think that he should probably be learning how to throw a slider and kind of proving a bit more that the profile can work, because as majestic as that curveball is, it's more aesthetically pleasing than analytically pleasing, I think. And it's very easy to tell which pitch is going to be coming out of his hand as a result. Ryan Sloan, to me, I thought was really well suited. I think that there's three pitches that flash plus in the change, the slider and the fastball. And I think they all play very well off of each other. I think the frame is awesome. I think that there's already a lot there with a lot of frame upside, and he commands the ball really well. I think like he projects to maybe above average command, and like with how well he repeats and how young he is, I think it's very reasonable to think he could get to plus command. So for me, he was one of like, I thought there was three guys in this class that genuinely to me look like guys who could be true like top rotation arms, and Sloan was one of them. And I think that landing on the Mariners is a good place for him to land to get to that ceiling. So for me, I was really excited. Also, Illinois has produced a ton of really good, really quick moving prep pitchers recently. So yeah, there's a lot there that I like, where it kind of like, I don't love prep pitching as a whole, but in this class, I'm more willing to gamble a little bit on upside, and every box that you would want to see is there. I also like stealing pitchers away from Wake Forest commitments, just because they know what they're doing when they're scouting almost more than most teams do in the pros. And if they see something that can analytically be developed into a top rotation guy for them, I think that's exciting. Whereas drafting pitchers from Wake Forest, I'm a little bit more concerned about, okay, what's the ceiling after this? How can they get better when they're coming from pitching dev like this?
That's interesting that you comped Jurrangelo to Bryce Miller, because like if you just told me I was getting another Bryce Miller from this class, they would just be easily my number one pitcher from the class, honestly. Like
really,
especially just because of the landing spot in Seattle. The park is just so favorable for pitchers.
That's true.
And like Bryce Miller's got a career 109 whip. So like, I'll take that all day. Now you, interestingly, you did not. Well, okay. So I kind of want to talk about the Brewers a little bit, and then I wanted to mention a couple teams you didn't bring up. But like, I'm very excited about both prep pitchers the Brewers ended up with. Chris Lavonis and Bryce McCague. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but where are you at on those two prep arms that the Brewers took with picks 57 and 67?
I thought they were great picks personally. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think they're both kind of spin doctors with some velo upside, and that's a profile that the Brewers have done really well with. I think it's going to be usually with the Brewers with those prep arms a little bit of a slower burn, but I think that they're guys that will get a tremendous amount of swing and miss at the lower levels, and then kind of the command will come over time a little bit. But yeah, I thought they were great fits, and they're people that, like, if I'm looking kind of in the 30s of an FYPD, they'd be players I'd look at targeting at that point.
Do you have a preference out of the two?
I prefer Lavonis a little bit, but it's not like a huge gap. I just like Lavonis a bit more.
And taking prep arms is kind of a new thing for the Brewers. Like Josh Noth was kind of the first sort of big dollar prep arm they'd taken, and I think that's partly because of the new regime. Obviously, Arnold was under Stearns, but Stearns was never into taking. So the two teams that you did not bring up that I wanted to just get your take on quick, like the Guardians always used to be sort of the team people would bring up with this type of thing, and they did take one of the top prep arms from the class, Braylon Doty. Do you think the Guardians have kind of slipped to like the sort of second tier of pitching dev, or are they still up there for you? And then where are you at on Doty?
Yeah, I think for me, second tier. They got so many guys poached. I think, including that's how the Mariners turned their pitching dev around, was stealing Max Wiener from them, who's now was at Texas A&M last year and now at Texas. They're good. They're good pitching dev. I think that they're in that thing where they're really, really good at developing guys that maybe could be back end starters from cheap value. So guys like Matt Wilkinson, for example, where it's like, I don't really understand how that's working when I watch it, but there's clearly something there, but not necessarily someone that like I'm going to be jumping all over in fantasy. Just someone that's like, maybe they turn this low value pick into a starter. And then with their like higher like stuff pitchers, they've struggled a bit, which hurts a ton because I was as big of an Espino guy and still am as is possible. And I've liked a lot of guys. I do have, so we kind of have a my guys thing coming up towards the end of this. Levi Sterling was one of the guys on that, and so is Braylon Doty. I kind of talked about how I was a little bit lower on Will Smith's profile, particularly the curveball. I like Braylon Doty's a lot more. I think, to me, I thought he had the best curveball in the class in terms of like how it will actually play in game. I think it pairs way better off of his other stuff. He's got a better slider too. Just a tremendous amount of spin. Like, I would have bet very good money that he was going to end up a Brewer, actually. Just by looking at him, like, I kind of has like a Josh Nothi profile to me, a similar frame as well. So I really like Braylon Doty, and I think that he's a good fit for that dev. I'm really excited to see how it turns out. But yeah, they're in the 5 to 10 range for me, I think.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then I did. So this is it's kind of a weird one, but what do you think of the Mets essentially since like David Stearns took over? Just because Tidwell was awesome at AA. AAA has been a disaster for him, but you've got Brandon Sproat, Nolan McLean, Jonah Tong, among others, as guys that have kind of really increased their stock this season. And I liked Jonathan Santucci a decent amount before the draft, and I love the Mets ballpark for fantasy. So where are you at on the Mets right now?
I think that's a very fair call. I think they'd actually probably be the next up for me. The only thing is I haven't been able to really see them turn that into the MLB success yet, not because it's been failing at the MLB level, just because I haven't had time to do that. I think they've done a really good job with player dev, and I guess it seems like scouting to their player development, which is the biggest thing. I think that's a great call. Also, shout out Jonah Tong, who's from the same academy as Daniel Espino. I'm pretty close with. Love seeing him take off like that. I think the Mets, like this time next year, could be one of those teams where it's like, okay, we got to put the Mets on there. I just need to see it kind of translate to the MLB a little bit more. But I think it's a very good call.
Okay, so we already kind of hit on a couple of your guys throughout this process, but now let's get to whoever you got left over here. Like, so we're kind of talking about guys that aren't going to go in the first round of a first-year player draft per se, but guys that you might be targeting as early as the second round and certainly in like the third and fourth round.
I don't. He probably will go first round, I think. But I did want to shout out Cam Smith, who is a bit polarizing. I know a lot of people who really are out on him. For me, I love the fit with the Cubs, and especially in a class like this, I'm just like, how do they fit the player dev? Right, like that's going to be the most important thing. I'd consider Cam Smith over guys like Jack Caglione, personally, who I have some concerns about how much he'll hit, and I have some concerns about how much the Royals can teach someone to make better swing decisions and maybe alter swings to avoid swing and miss. I think the Cubs, he's a great fit for what the Cubs want to do. I think he can stick at third base. His arm is so strong. He reminds me a lot of kind of Jordan Walker. He was younger for the class guy, sophomore, made huge strides. You got wood bat track record. You've got crazy EVs. You've got a very simplified swing that's resulted in a bit more ground ball contact. I think that the Cubs have done a good job, maybe as good a job of anybody, of getting guys that can make contact, have an okay approach, and just getting them to hit the ball hard and in the air. So I love that fit. I think he's got huge upside and a somewhat higher floor compared to a lot of the other players, and can be had probably towards the back end of round one. I would have him probably top 5 in my first year player draft right off the bat. We'll see. I need to talk to player draft, but
I've got him top 10. I'm with you. I'm not quite as high on him as you are, but like I definitely, if I had a sort of later first round pick, I'd be very happy ending up with Cam Smith.
And then another guy who may end up going, we'll kind of see where he goes. Theo Gillen's been my guy before landing spot, and I do like the landing spot a lot with the Rays. I thought he was, health is going to be an issue, maybe. Like it's a concern, at least. He's had a couple major injuries, and one that he doesn't seem to be super healed from in his labrum. That being said, like I thought he was definitely the best prep player in this class. Like I definitely preferred him to Bryce Rayner and to Connor Griffin if he's healthy. Like I haven't seen the medicals, and I'll need to get more on that. I love the landing spot with the Rays. He reminds me exactly of Evan Carter at that time. Really similar frame, really similar profile. I think he has the best bat to ball of any of the preps for sure, outside of maybe Slade Caldwell, who's 8 inches shorter. And I think the power isn't there yet, but I think it's definitely coming. I think that he has a chance to be like a legitimate plus hitter, which I think there's maybe, even if you include college, maybe one other plus hitter in the entire draft. And I think he's got a chance to have above average power, above average speed, and play really good center field defense. And with the Rays, like the concern is arm. Like he's good enough to play shortstop or third base defensively for sure, but his arm has been a little iffy. So maybe it's second base, maybe it's center field. With the Rays, like they'll probably move them all around. So he'll probably have a ton of different position eligibility. I think you got a guy that's got star upside in a class that's pretty much after maybe pick 3, like completely devoid of offensive star upside. So Theo Gillen is kind of my Colt Emerson of this class, where I'm way higher on him, it seems, than everybody else.
Just quickly, so you were saying he might have the second best hit tool in the class. Do you have him ahead of Weatherholt hit tool wise?
I have him right the same. I think Weatherholt, I think Bazana to me has the best hit tool in the class. I think he's got just a plus hit tool. Maybe like a Griff O'Farrell or someone like that. But in terms of people that have like actual impact, I think it'd probably go Bazana, then maybe Gillen, and then Weatherholt. I just have a bit more concerns about the translation of it. I think he's an above average hit tool for me.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt if you had somebody else you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'll try to run through quick, but another big my guy is Kalen Culpepper, who I go back to Team USA a little bit. College Team USA, a lot of guys struggled quite a bit there. A lot of guys that went ahead of him, even JJ Weatherholt, who was probably the second best hitter, struggled, I would say. Definitely. I'm blanking on the name right now. Tennessee's second base, Christian Moore. Christian Moore struggled time. I prefer Kalen Culpepper to Christian Moore by a good amount. I think they're very similar in that they have a tremendous amount of bat speed and some questionable pitch selection. The difference is I think Kalen Culpepper's swing is a bit more geared to it. And I've seen him, Team USA, he was by far the best hitter on that team. I don't think it was really close. And I think he landed in the perfect spot, unlike Christian Moore, to develop him, where I think the Twins, who I kind of go up and down with on their hitting dev, one thing they do very, very good or very, very well is develop pitch selection. And that's the one concern I have with Kalen Culpepper. And so I love that landing spot. I think that there's a tremendous amount of raw power there, tremendous amount of bat speed. I think the swing works really well. I think defensively, he's either going to be a league average shortstop or like a Gold Glove level third baseman. I think he runs well enough to chip in 10, 12 steals a year. So he's one of those guys I could see just totally exploding. And if I have a second round pick in FYPD, he's someone that I'd be targeting personally, that I love the fit and I love the upside of. I think also a lot of the really smart teams are in on him, I will note as well. A guy that I think like everyone's been poo-pooing that I liked quite a bit and I like the fit of is Dante Nori in Philly. I think that he's older for the class. He's almost 20. He'll probably be 20 by the end of the summer, if I remember correctly, which is weird for a prep. He's a bit undersized, but he is strong. He's not a small person. He's just a bit shorter. I think he makes some of the best swing decisions of any of the prep hitters I've seen. I think his swing works really, really well. He's a plus runner, maybe double plus, can easily play center field. I think the above average center fielder. And I think that he's not a slappy hitter. I think he's got a clean, simple swing, but he hits the ball pretty hard. I think he's going to have at least fringe average, maybe average power with an above average hit tool and 70 grade speed. And I think that Philly also has done a really good job at getting guys that make really good swing decisions. So I really like that fit there. JD Dix, who went maybe earlier than I expected, but was a my guy, went to Arizona, I believe, at 35 overall, if I remember correctly. He was the guy who was hurt for a lot of the year and coming out of Wisconsin. So someone that, as a cold weather prep, that's a bit concerning. Had a bit of a down summer as a result of him being hurt, but I thought he had maybe the best like frame to swing combo of any of the prep hitters in the class that I saw outside of Theo Gillen. I really, really like his swing. It's really fluid. It's got plus bat speed. He's a bigger guy too. He was someone I was kind of hoping would end up on the Dodgers because I think he's a great fit for what they do. Very functional athlete. I think he has a chance to stick at shortstop despite his frame. And he's someone that I could see winding up like a 55 hit, 55 power, and then like average everywhere else, which in this class is awesome. Just got to have some concerns about coming from a cold weather state and the injury concerns. But yeah, I thought he went where he should have gone. I was just a bit surprised to see that happen. Tyler Bell is someone who is not my usual profile, but reminded me a lot of, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on the name right now? Give me 1 second. Oh, Carson Williams. I don't know why that was so hard for me to pull up, but he reminds me a ton of Carson Williams on the Rays and went to the Rays. So that's a fit that I like quite a bit there. I think he has a chance to be a plus shortstop with above average to plus power and plus speed. And we'll kind of see how the hit tool comes along, but that was the perfect landing spot for a player that I think has really high upside. Another guy that I really liked from the pitching ranks was Joey Oki, who another guy I really thought was probably going to end up on the Pirates, but wound up on Cleveland as well. He has probably the best slider I've seen in the class. I would put a 70 on the slider, honestly. And I think that he's got a 60 fastball. I kind of really like the running on right-handers movement on it. Kind of reminded me a lot of Xander Muth last year, who was another my guy. I think he has a chance to explode. I think I might even like him a bit more than Braylon Doty, who is another my guy. So I was really excited about him. Caleb Bonham on the White Sox was an interesting pick. I think that there is some concerns with how the swing works for me, but in a class like this, I think they've done a good job with guys with a bit slower bat speed. But all the rest of the tools are there. So I think he could be an upside play. There's a lot of power in there from Cold Weather State. And the last guy I'd mention is for like a late round flyer, Thatcher Hurd, who's a guy I loved in high school, ended up going to UCLA, turned down a decent amount of money to do so. Kind of a similar profile to Braylon Doty, where it's just a tremendous amount of spin and then a lot of speed on the fastball, but maybe not the best movement profile. He went to New York, who I think has done a really good job with this profile. I like him more than Ben Hess, who they took in the first round. And I think that it's a perfect org for him to unlock. He's got crazy raw stuff with crazy analytical profile. It's just, can you put it together and make it work? I think that New York is a good landing spot for that.
A lot of good names there. The one guy I wanted to circle back on before I let you go is the Kalen Culpepper call. Mm-hmm. My only question with him was just how much power he's going to get to. Just because, I mean, he hit for power in college, but it's, everyone who had any power was hitting for power this year. He hit 11 homers in 61 games. I was kind of getting more of like a Key Brian Hayes type of vibe from him. But do you see like more power than that in there in games at peak?
I do. I think he has a really physical frame. I do think I actually comped him to Brian Hayes as well at some point. I think with wood bats, he struggled a bit on Cape Cod. But also for Team USA, he hit 3 home runs and was definitely the best hitter there. So I was pretty excited about that. I think that he's someone who, as the year went on, he just got better and better. And I think by the time, from the Big 12 conference tournament on, he had like a 1.4 OPS. The power really started to come on as the year went on. And then when you look at his bat speed and kind of how the swing works, I think that, and you factor in that he's going to the Twins, who just do a really good job with that profile. I think the lack of power came more from swing selection or pitch selection and swing decisions than it did from anything to do with bat speed or his swing path itself. Okay. So I think he's someone who could hit maybe 18 to 25 home runs, depending on the year, while also shooting the gap quite a bit, hitting a lot of doubles and providing a lot of value elsewhere. Yeah.
I mean, he could steal double-digit bases too, right?
Yeah. I think that he could be kind of a guy who hits like 270, 280 with a slightly lower OBP, and then provide a lot of doubles, a lot of runs, a lot of stolen bases. I mean, not a lot, but maybe like 10 to 15 stolen bases and, say 20 home runs a year, which I think is in this class awesome. And he's also such a good defender that like he's going to get plenty of opportunities to get at bats.
And that was Kalen Culpepper,
yes,
who the Twins selected in the first round. I know people get annoyed when we don't say the last name enough, and they have to rewind. So I just wanted to make sure, because that's interesting. Because I mean, the player you're sort of describing is a guy that is sort of like a borderline first year player draft type of guy for this class. So
I think so. And if you look at the other teams that were like really in on him, it's a lot of the Orioles, and there's maybe one college player the Dodgers looking at, and it's Kalen Culpepper. And yeah, I think he was tied to a lot of really smart teams that are really good with player depth, and landed in maybe the best one for developing swing decisions, which is his one glaring weakness. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about him.
Well, that's awesome. Alex, you got anything you want to plug before I let you go?
Not too much going on right now. I am working on a lot of complex stuff right now for Prospects Live. I'm going to be having a top 20 prospects in the complex level coming out pretty soon here. And then I'm going to start doing more of my DSL research and my FYPD. This time of year for FYPD for me is a whole lot of trying to connect with all my contacts and figure out, okay, what's the development plan that you have for this person and who's kind of showing out and looking good, like once they're starting to get some instruction with the pro teams, which is, I think you glean a lot of information from. So going to be doing a lot of that too.
Awesome. Well, definitely follow everything that Alex is pumping out there, and be on the lookout for more for sure player draft content from him, and definitely subscribe to Prospects Live. Definitely recommend that. All right, that'll do it for this week's RotoWire Prospect Podcast, brought to you by PickSix, the new fantasy game from DraftKings. Use code RWPicks for $50 in PickSix credits with a $5 deposit.